Missouri never had its moment. No tech explosion that minted millionaires overnight. No housing frenzy that turned modest homes into lottery tickets. No gold rush of outsiders flooding in with money, hype, and expectations that transformed communities beyond recognition. While California was becoming synonymous with innovation, Missouri was farming and manufacturing. While Texas was exploding with oil money and corporate relocations, Missouri was quietly maintaining. While Florida was absorbing migration waves and real estate speculation that seemed to have no ceiling, Missouri was doing what it had always done. Nothing dramatic, nothing viral, nothing that made national headlines or attracted national attention. For decades, that was framed as failure. Missouri became the punchline, flyover country, the place between places that matter, the state people drove through on their way to somewhere more exciting. The narrative was clear. Missouri missed the boat. Missouri could not compete. Missouri was being left behind while dynamic states surged ahead. But here is the uncomfortable truth most people still do not want to admit. The states that boomed the hardest are now breaking the fastest. California is hemorrhaging population, struggling with housing costs that make middle-class life impossible, and watching businesses relocate to states they once dismissed as irrelevant. Texas is discovering that explosive growth brings explosive problems: infrastructure strain, water scarcity, insurance crises, and the realization that boom conditions do not last forever. Florida is facing a reckoning with insurance markets, climate exposure, and housing costs that have priced out the workers its economy depends on. And Missouri is still here, still functioning, still affordable, still offering something that booming states sacrificed in their rush toward growth. Missouri's refusal to boom may be the very thing that keeps it standing when others fall. This is not a hype story. This channel does not do hype. This is a survival story, and Missouri has been quietly writing it for decades while nobody was paying attention. Missouri sits in the middle of the country geographically, but it never sat at the center of America's imagination. It wasn't California with tech money reshaping entire regions, creating billionaires from garage startups, and establishing the mythology that innovation happens on the coasts and nowhere else. It wasn't Texas with oil wealth, corporate-friendly policies attracting headquarters relocations, and a growth narrative so aggressive it became its own brand of American exceptionalism. It wasn't Florida with retiree migration, international investment, and real estate speculation that turned modest properties into wealth-building vehicles for anyone lucky enough to buy at the right time. Missouri didn't become a national state. The cultural moment never arrived. The spotlight never swung toward the center of the country and decided to stay. And because of that absence, Missouri missed something else too. The speculative frenzy. No mass-flipping culture developed here. The investors who treated housing as a commodity rather than shelter, buying properties not to live in but to flip, rent, or hold for appreciation, largely ignored Missouri. The returns were not exciting enough. The appreciation was not fast enough. The buzz was not loud enough. No runaway housing bubbles inflated prices beyond any connection to local economic reality. Homes in Missouri remained priced at levels that bore some relationship to what local workers actually earned. The detachment between housing costs and wages that made coastal cities unaffordable for ordinary people never fully arrived in Missouri. No industries built entirely on hype emerged to dominate the economy. Missouri's economic base remained grounded in things people actually need: healthcare, education, logistics, manufacturing, agriculture. Unglamorous sectors that do not attract venture capital or generate unicorn valuations, but do provide jobs that exist year after year, regardless of market sentiment. While other states were selling futures, betting that growth would continue forever, that prices would only rise, that the good times were permanent features rather than temporary conditions. Missouri stayed grounded in present reality. Missouri dealt with what was actually happening rather than what speculation suggested might happen. It built economies around current needs rather than projected demands. It grew at rates that existing infrastructure could support rather than rates that required constant expansion just to avoid collapse. That conservatism, that resistance to getting swept up in national enthusiasms, seemed like failure when the enthusiasms were producing wealth. It looks different now that the enthusiasms are producing consequences. When people hear the word boom, they think opportunity. They imagine jobs appearing, wealth accumulating, futures brightening. They picture the rising tide that supposedly lifts all boats, the prosperity that supposedly spreads through communities that embrace growth. But booms come with hidden costs that rarely appear in the celebration narratives. Here is what explosive growth actually brings to states that experience it. Housing inflation that moves quickly and benefits existing owners while pricing out everyone who arrives after the early stages. People who bought before the boom build wealth. People who arrive during or after the boom face costs that consume their incomes and eliminate their savings. The same growth that creates winners systematically creates losers. Wage pressure that benefits certain sectors while leaving others behind. When tech workers earning six figures flood into a region, they bid up housing costs, but the nurses, teachers, firefighters, and service workers that communities need do not receive corresponding raises. The economy bifurcates into those who benefit from the boom and those who suffer its consequences. Overbuilding based on future assumptions that may never materialize. Developers build for the growth they expect, rather than the demand that exists. When growth slows, and growth always eventually slows, the surplus becomes vacancy. Vacancy becomes blight, and blight becomes community decline. Heavy reliance on migration to sustain prices and tax bases. Boom economies often depend on the continuous arrival of new residents to maintain the dynamics that created the boom. When that migration slows, because costs become prohibitive, because alternative destinations emerge, or because economic conditions change, the entire structure becomes vulnerable. Missouri avoided most of this. Home prices rose over the decades, but slowly and incrementally, at rates that tracked income growth rather than outpacing it dramatically. Families who bought homes in Missouri could afford them. They were not stretching to the breaking point. They were not one job loss away from foreclosure. Development happened, but cautiously. Missouri cities did not overbuild based on projections that assumed permanent boom conditions. They built for current demand with modest expectations about future growth. That conservatism meant Missouri did not create the housing surplus that devastates boom-bust markets. Population growth was steady, not explosive. Missouri gained residents gradually, rather than absorbing waves that stressed infrastructure, transformed communities, and created the conditions for eventual reversal. That measured approach meant Missouri never built an economy that required constant growth just to survive. The state does not need perpetual migration to maintain housing prices. It does not need perpetual development to maintain construction employment. It does not need perpetual hype to maintain economic function. Missouri can simply continue. That ability to continue without requiring acceleration is rare, and it becomes critical when the economic cycle turns. Let's talk about housing specifically, because this is where Missouri's supposed failure starts to look like foresight. Missouri home prices never detached from local incomes the way they did in boom states. The ratio between what homes cost and what workers earn remained within a range that allowed ordinary people to become homeowners without destroying their financial stability. Even today, after years of national housing appreciation, the numbers tell a clear story. Median home prices in Missouri remain far below national hotspots. What buys a modest condo in San Francisco buys a comfortable single-family home in Missouri. What serves as a down payment in Seattle covers an entire purchase in parts of Missouri. Mortgage burdens are lower relative to wages. Missouri homeowners do not spend 50% or 60% of their income on housing the way coastal homeowners often do. That leaves room for savings, for emergencies, for life beyond mortgage payments. Property taxes, while rising like everywhere else, remain manageable compared to states where government spending expanded alongside property values. Missouri homeowners are not taxed on theoretical appreciation that does not translate into actual cash flow. The implications of this different housing reality compound over time. Fewer Missouri homeowners are over-leveraged, stretched so thin that any disruption threatens their ability to maintain payments. They have margin, they have cushion, they have room to absorb shocks that would devastate homeowners who borrowed to their absolute limits. Fewer Missouri homeowners are dependent on appreciation just to stay solvent. In boom states, many owners are essentially betting that their homes will be worth more tomorrow than today, because they need that appreciation to refinance, to cover costs, to make the math work. Missouri homeowners can simply live in their homes without needing the homes to perform as investments. Fewer Missouri homeowners will be forced to sell the moment conditions tighten. When recessions hit and job losses mount, the homeowners who face foreclosure first are the ones operating at the edge. Missouri has fewer people at that edge. Missouri homeowners did not build wealth fast. The appreciation that turned California homes into retirement accounts and Florida condos into generational assets did not happen at the same rate in Missouri. But they did not build fragility either. The debt burdens, the leverage, the dependence on continuous appreciation. Missouri homeowners largely avoided the traps that boom state homeowners walked into willingly. And in downturns, fragility matters more than speed. The homeowners who kept their houses through 2008 were not the ones who had built the most paper wealth. They were the ones who could actually afford their mortgages when conditions deteriorated. Missouri is full of people who can actually afford their mortgages. That is not exciting, but it is durable. Missouri does not have glamorous industries that attract ambitious young people from around the world. No one moves to Missouri to chase the next big thing. No startup ecosystem generates the buzz that pulls talented engineers from established careers. No venture capital scene creates the mythology of ordinary people becoming extraordinarily wealthy from the right idea at the right time. Instead, Missouri runs on industries that do not generate headlines, but do generate stability. Healthcare employs enormous numbers of Missourians in jobs that cannot be offshored, cannot be automated easily, and will not disappear because of economic cycles. People get sick regardless of whether the economy is booming or busting. Healthcare demand is essentially constant. Education employs teachers, administrators, and support staff in jobs tied to population rather than economic sentiment. Schools do not close during recessions. Universities do not stop enrolling students when the stock market drops. Logistics employs workers who move goods through Missouri's central geography. As long as Americans consume products, those products need to move across the country, and Missouri sits at the crossroads where that movement happens. Manufacturing still exists in Missouri, reduced from its peak certainly, but not eliminated. Factories still operate. Workers still produce things. The sector that built the American middle class still provides middle-class jobs in Missouri, even as it is hollowed out elsewhere. Agriculture connects Missouri to the land in ways that urban economies have lost. Food production does not stop during recessions. The economic foundation provided by farming is as durable as the human need to eat. Government and administration provide stable employment tied to population and institutional need rather than market dynamics. These are not boom industries. Nobody gets rich quick working in Missouri healthcare or Missouri logistics. The wealth accumulation that happens in tech or finance, the exponential growth that turns ordinary workers into millionaires, does not happen in Missouri's dominant sectors. But these sectors do not collapse overnight either. When recessions hit, tech companies lay off thousands of workers in single announcements. Finance firms cut headcount dramatically when deals stop flowing. Boom industries shed employment as rapidly as they accumulated it. Missouri's industries don't work that way. Healthcare reduces hours before it reduces headcount. Education cuts programs before it cuts teachers. Logistics slows but doesn't stop. When recessions hit Missouri, the state doesn't lose entire sectors at once. The pain distributes rather than concentrates. The unemployment spikes are smaller, the duration shorter, the recovery faster. That's not because Missouri is lucky. It's because Missouri built an economy designed for stability rather than spectacle. Speculators chase two things: rapid appreciation and constant demand from outsiders. Appreciation means buying something today that will be worth significantly more tomorrow, not because you improved it or added value, but simply because market dynamics pushed prices upward. The speculator's dream is profit without production. Constant demand from outsiders means a continuous stream of new buyers arriving to purchase what speculators accumulated. Without that stream, appreciation stops, and speculative positions become traps rather than opportunities. Missouri offered neither. Appreciation happened slowly, too slowly to justify the transaction costs, the carrying expenses, and the opportunity costs of speculative investment. Money deployed in Missouri real estate produced returns that looked modest compared to what the same money could produce in boom markets. Demand came primarily from locals, people who lived in Missouri, worked in Missouri, and wanted to own homes in Missouri. That demand was stable but limited. It did not include the waves of outside buyers that created speculative opportunities elsewhere. And because Missouri offered neither rapid appreciation nor outside demand, speculators went elsewhere. Investors who treated housing as commodity rather than shelter deployed their capital in California, Florida, Arizona, Nevada, anywhere the numbers looked better than Missouri's boring stability. Flippers who profited by buying distressed properties, making minimal improvements, and selling into rising markets found Missouri's flat appreciation curves unattractive. The spreads were not large enough, and the velocity was not fast enough. Short-term rental operators who converted housing into hospitality found Missouri's tourism markets too small to justify the conversions that hollowed out housing stock in destination cities. That absence of speculative interest was not by accident, and it was not because speculators failed to notice Missouri. Missouri's growth was boring enough to scare off hype money. The returns that Missouri offered, steady, modest, predictable, did not match what speculators needed to justify their strategies. Boring in economic cycles is powerful. The communities that speculators targeted are now dealing with consequences. Housing unaffordable to workers. Neighborhoods converted to rental properties owned by distant investors. Markets dependent on dynamics that have already begun reversing. Missouri does not have those problems because Missouri never attracted the attention that created them. Missouri didn't explode with new residents the way Sunbelt states did during the pandemic migration wave. No dramatic population surge required emergency infrastructure expansion. No sudden demand spike overwhelmed housing supply and sent prices spiraling. No mass arrival of remote workers with coastal salaries bid up prices beyond what local workers could afford. But Missouri also didn't hollow out the way many Midwestern and Northeastern states did. The population losses that devastated Detroit, Cleveland, and other cities that lost their economic purpose didn't replicate in Missouri. The state maintained population, not through dramatic growth, but through sufficient retention and organic replacement. Population shifts in Missouri are slower and more organic than the patterns that reshape other states. Families put down roots and stay for generations. The transience that characterizes boom markets, where people arrive chasing opportunity and leave when that opportunity fades, is less common in Missouri. Long-term residents. Anchor communities, the institutional knowledge, the social connections, and the civic participation that make communities function require people who stick around. Missouri has those people. Economic ties are durable. People in Missouri work jobs connected to the place where they live, rather than jobs that could theoretically be performed anywhere. That connection between work and place creates stability that purely remote economies lack. This demographic pattern creates communities that don't evaporate when conditions change. When housing costs rise somewhere else, Missouri residents don't flee because Missouri costs were already manageable. When jobs soften, Missouri residents don't automatically relocate because their roots run deep enough to justify riding out difficulty. Missouri isn't built on temporary people, the population that arrives during good times and leaves when conditions deteriorate. It's built on permanent people who stay regardless of what headlines say about their state. And that changes everything when pressure arrives. As the national economy tightens, as the Federal Reserve maintains higher rates, as the labor market softens, and as the accumulated excesses of the easy money era work their way through the system, the states under pressure share the same traits: high costs that leave no margin for error. When housing, insurance, taxes, and basic expenses consume most of household income, there is nothing left to absorb shocks. Any disruption, job loss, medical emergency, or family crisis can tip households from managing to struggling to failing. High debt accumulated during boom times. The leverage that seemed smart when appreciation was rapid becomes crushing when appreciation stops. Households, businesses, and governments that borrowed against expected growth face reality when that growth does not materialize. High dependence on growth. Narratives that justified current conditions. Boom states told stories about permanent prosperity, about being different from places that experienced cycles, about having found the formula that exempted them from economic gravity. Those stories are being tested now. Missouri does not fit that profile. Costs are moderate. Missouri households have margin. They can absorb shocks that would devastate households operating at the edge. Debt is manageable. Missouri homeowners did not leverage to their limits. Missouri businesses did not expand based on projections that required permanent boom conditions. Missouri governments did not spend as if revenue growth would never slow. The economy does not depend on growth narratives. Missouri does not need constant migration to maintain housing prices. It does not need constant appreciation to maintain household solvency. It does not need constant hype to justify its existence. Missouri just needs continuity. It needs to keep doing what it has been doing, functioning steadily, providing jobs that exist year after year, and maintaining communities that do not evaporate. And continuity is rare in an era built on excess. The states that require growth to survive will struggle when growth becomes unavailable. The states that merely require continuity will persist. Missouri requires continuity, and Missouri can provide continuity. That's the advantage that nobody recognizes until the cycle turns, and survival becomes more important than spectacular success. This analysis should not suggest that Missouri is invincible, or that its current position guarantees future success. Slow growth can become stagnation. The same dynamics that prevented a boom can also prevent necessary development. When infrastructure needs upgrading, when industries need modernizing, when communities need investment, the absence of growth pressure can become an excuse for inaction. Underinvestment can catch up. Missouri's modest budgets maintained stability, but did not necessarily build for the future. Deferred infrastructure maintenance, delayed educational investment, and neglected community development create deficits that compound over time. Infrastructure still matters. The roads, bridges, water systems, and digital connections that enable economic activity require ongoing investment, regardless of whether the economy is booming or stable. Missouri cannot assume that stability means systems maintain themselves. But Missouri's biggest advantage is also its biggest risk: complacency. The state survived by being overlooked. It avoided the destruction that attention brings. It maintained stability while others experienced volatility. But survival isn't thriving. Avoiding damage isn't building strength. Missouri won't maximize its position if it assumes that what worked before will work forever. The state that stayed stable while others boomed now has an opportunity. As boom states struggle with the consequences of their growth, Missouri can offer an alternative, a place that works, a place that is affordable, a place that does not require betting your financial future on appreciation that may never come. But capturing that opportunity requires intention. It requires recognizing what Missouri has. It requires investing in the foundations that made stability possible. It requires welcoming the people fleeing boom states without repeating the mistakes those states made. It won't thrive if it stays asleep. Missouri never boomed. And for years, for decades, people treated that like a failure. Like Missouri had missed the train. Like the state had been too slow, too conservative, too boring to participate in the prosperity that was transforming other places. That narrative assumed booms were permanent, that growth was always good, that the states surging ahead would keep surging forever while Missouri fell further behind. But booms are not permanent. Growth is not always good, and the states that surged ahead are now dealing with the consequences of their surging. In an America built on bubbles, leverage, and speculation, where success meant explosive growth and failure meant anything less, the states that never exploded may be the ones still standing when the cycle completes. Missouri did not chase the dream. It did not bet everything on appreciation that might not come. It did not build an economy that required constant growth just to avoid collapse. Missouri stayed real incomes, real housing costs, real communities, real stability. And that reality might be what saves it. So here is the question I want you to think about. Would you rather live in a place that rises fast, or one that does not fall hard? Would you rather chase spectacular gains that might reverse, or accept modest stability that persists? Would you rather bet on boom, or build on continuity? These are not just abstract questions about economic philosophy. They are practical questions about how you want to live your life, where you want to raise your family, what kind of financial foundation you want to build. The answers are not obvious. Reasonable people can disagree, but the question deserves more consideration than it usually gets, because the cultural assumption that growth is always better, that booms are always desirable, that the exciting places are the best places has been tested and found wanting. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what matters more to you, upside potential or downside protection. Tell me whether Missouri's stability looks like an advantage or a limitation. Tell me what you've learned from watching boom states deal with the consequences of their booming. And if you want the unfiltered truth about the places most people overlook, the analysis that does not chase hype, does not repeat comfortable narratives, and does not pretend that louder always means better, subscribe to Hard Truth Untold, because the most important stories are usually the ones that do not generate headlines. And Missouri has been quietly telling one of the most important stories in America. Thanks for watching. Stay informed. I'll see you in the next one.